Good evening, everyone. I'm Charles Overby, Chairman and CEO of the Newseum, and I want to welcome all of you here to the Newseum. I hope that most of you have been here already. We opened in 2008, but I know that many of you have not been here. And so I want to encourage you to come back. You know it's a news museum. That's the name, Newseum. But it's also mainly a history museum. And it is history in the sense that it's the first draft of history, which is what journalism is all about. People come here and they see the big stories of their lives and their parents' lives and their grandparents' lives, and they see it the way it was written the day it happened. And we've presented it in an interactive way with lots of interactive exhibits, 15 theaters and 14 galleries. Tonight's terrific turnout shows just how much interest there is in history when it means something to the present and the future. And you know, we have found that the visitors who come here to the Newseum enjoy seeing the past and then seeing that as a glimpse into the future. That's what this program's all about tonight. The reason we are having this program here in the Newseum is because Susan Eisenhower came to me a few months ago with this idea. And of course, because I'm not brain dead, I said, what a great idea that would be. And the applause, Susan, I think is not because I'm not brain dead, but for you. Most of you know Susan, but I want to make sure you understand just the significance of what she has done and is doing. She's the founding director and the first president of the Eisenhower Institute of Gettysburg College. And she is known for her work for national security in energy fields. And she's currently the chairman of the Eisenhower Institute's She's chairman of the Eisenhower Institute. And last year, Secretary Stephen Chu appointed her to serve on the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future, which has been tasked with developing a long-term solution for safely managing the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle. Susan Eisenhower also serves as chairman of the Eisenhower Group, Inc., which provides strategic counsel on political and business projects for Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. She's written 3 books and she's edited 4 collected volumes on regional security issues, most recently, Partners in Space. She was a fellow at the Institute of Politics at the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard University, and she was a distinguished fellow at the Nixon Center. She also serves on the advisory board of MIT's Energy Initiative and the Nuclear Threat Initiative, which is co-chaired by former Senator Sam Nunn and Ted Turner. But from my standpoint, her best characteristic is she is my friend. Welcome, Susan Eisenhower.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'll tell you what a wonderful gathering this is. I know people have come from all over the country, and there's something very gratifying about having so many old friends in this room here tonight to mark this anniversary. It's also very gratifying that the weather cooperated. I have to say that whether you know it or not, this is called Eisenhower weather. Eisenhower weather is defined by some kind of temporary clearing. When the skies clear up, the rain stops, and it gives you just enough time to get where you're going. I have to tell you, it reminded me of this wonderful story. Milton Eisenhower, Ike's youngest brother, was president of a number of very important universities, but this particular event took place at Penn State. And he persuaded his brother, the president, to come give a commencement address. And he was worried about whether or not the address would have to be moved inside because of bad weather. They were planning to hold it outside. And so he called up Ike and he said, Ike, I am so worried about the weather. What are we going to do? Should we move it in? Should we leave it out? I mean, we'll have to turn people away if we have to move it indoors. And Ike said to his younger brother, Milton, listen, Milton, you figure it out. I haven't worried about the weather since June 6, 1944. Yeah. Dwight Eisenhower was a leader from another era of American history. It was a simpler time, and the United States was the unrivaled economic and military powerhouse of the free world. On January 20th, 1961, the former five-star general and two-term president left the inauguration of his successor and went into retirement with Mamie, his wife of 45 years. They left the White House without Secret Service men, chiefs of staff, or retinues of aides or retainers, and no fat consulting agreements or lucrative board appointments. Eisenhower went back to the land of his ancestors, Pennsylvania, to become a gentleman farmer and make a few hundred barren acres of soil productive again. In the last chapter of his life, he would tell us he wanted to take a piece of land and leave it better than the way he found it. From the horse and buggy era to the Great Depression and beyond, Ike had given more than 50 years of service to his country through the bloodiest wars in the history of man. During his 2 terms in office, he deftly led us through some of the most dangerous years of the Cold War with all its terrifying potential for Armageddon, through the dawn of the space age and the civil rights movement. In short, he had done and seen a lot. In laying down the mantle of power, Eisenhower left us with solemn words of leave-taking. I was just a kid at the time and did not really understand the full significance of Ike's accomplishments or the significance of this speech. But the weekend before his farewell address, which fell on a Tuesday, we as a family went up to Camp David for the last time. After sledding and enjoying the new fallen snow, we returned to Washington so that the president could finish up a number of last-minute pieces of business. The signing of the Columbia River Treaty with the Canadian government and meeting and saying goodbye to longtime associates. He would leave for private life a few days later to write his memoirs, to counsel former colleagues, and to attend to more mundane things like managing farm varmints, which included farm cats, and studying to get a driver's license since he didn't have Secret Service or any real staff. Word of warning, he hadn't driven in more than 25 years. He'd always been behind a chauffeur in some official car. Let's put it this way. Gettysburg traffic cops and route police remember Ike well. The night before delivering his farewell address to the nation, the president gave the last dinner party of his presidency for members of the press corps. Great reporters such as Bob Pierpoint, Ray Shearer, and Miriam Smith were among those in attendance. It is significant, I think, that members of the press corps were the last to dine with the 34th President of the United States. After Eisenhower's first inauguration, he'd given his first major speech to a similar group, the American Society of Newspaper Editors. In A Chance for Peace, in which he outlined the terrible costs that the Cold War would impose on our societies, he said, "The world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." During the war, Eisenhower had had excellent relations with the news media. He was convinced that they played an indispensable role then, and they continued to do so in a thriving democracy. He made a point of holding weekly press conferences. For these and many other reasons, including my dear friendship with Charles Overby, it seems appropriate that we should mark the anniversary of Eisenhower's farewell address here at the Newseum, a place that tells our history through the stories of our times and serves as a backdrop for discussing the important issues of our day. How my grandfather would have loved the idea of a freedom forum. Thank you, Charles and the Newseum, for your generous support and cooperation in making this event possible. We are also fortunate to have a distinguished group of panelists tonight. Their biographies are in the program, but I'd like to thank personally David Gergen for agreeing to moderate the panel. David, I think, deserves the title of the most trusted political commentator on the scene today, having served both Republican and Democrat presidents. James Fallow is also with us. He's a prolific and award-winning chronicler of the challenges facing this country at home and abroad. He brings a singular perspective to his journalism and to our subject tonight. Dana Priest is a courageous war correspondent and 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning author. She has much to say on the shape of the new complex that is emerging. And Evan Thomas, the voice of calm and reason on the Sunday morning talk show circuit, and a former Newsweek commentator, is author of 6 books, one soon to be a biography of Dwight Eisenhower. This high-powered panel will provide the connection points between this, Eisenhower's last speech, and our own transformational times. Thanks also go to the Eisenhower Foundation and the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum in Abilene, Kansas. The Foundation and the National Archives Complex is the repository of more than 26 million pages of historical records and papers, 68,000 artifacts, and more than 1 million photos and feet of original motion picture film. What resides there are some of the most important documents covering World War II and beyond. It is a national treasure in the truest sense of this word. Its director, Carl Weissenbach, is with us this evening. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause because I'll be recognizing a number of people, but Carl, would you please stand? We couldn't resist, could we? We are also indebted to other sponsors such as the Eisenhower Society and the Whitman and Pappas Funds, endowed funds bequeathed by Eisenhower Associates. But most of all, I'd like to single out an institution that was pivotal in making this event happen. Here's a hint. When I was growing up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, we had a joke. What do Lincoln and Eisenhower have in common? The answer? A Gettysburg Address. Gettysburg has been a small Pennsylvania town where big things happen. Gettysburg College itself played a role during the Battle of Gettysburg, and 100 years later served as a place where Dwight Eisenhower wrote his memoirs and sat on its board. More recently, the college has been preparing rising generation for careers in public service and public policy. Through its Eisenhower Institute, it provides programs to develop that quote-unquote alert and knowledgeable citizenry we will hear about tonight. I am delighted and honored to recognize President of Gettysburg College, Janet Morgan Riggs, who is with us tonight. Through her commitment to public policy and leadership programs, the college has rapidly become known for its excellence in this arena. I have seen firsthand through my seminar on campus the eagerness with which Gettysburg students are embracing studies related to the long-term challenges facing this country and preparing themselves to make their public contributions. Janet, will you please stand? I would now also like to ask my family members to stand. My sister Ann and her husband Wolfgang Flottel are with us from New York, as well as my sister Mary, who's come all the way from Kansas. Other family, please stand. Other family members, including my father John and my brother David and his wife Julie, regrettably were not able to be with us, but send their very best wishes. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge those in our audience who served in the Eisenhower administration. I know that one person here, Steve Hess, was on the team that worked on this speech, but would our Eisenhower alumni, there are more of you out there. Come on, please stand. Let's have all of the alums from the Eisenhower administration stand. Good. And now our evening's program. We are indebted to CBS News for giving us permission to show President Eisenhower's farewell address in its entirety. It's a sincere and earnest, if uncoached, speech, saying adieu. I hope, like me, you will find it striking for its authenticity. Eisenhower speaks to us from another era, almost like a ghost of America's past. He calls upon us in his final days to put America first so that we as a nation can leave to future generations a country is better than the way we found it. Thank you very much.
From the White House in the office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is the farewell address for President Eisenhower, whose 8 years as chief executive come to an end at noon Friday. Mr. Eisenhower has chosen this time for his final speech. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. First, I should like to express my gratitude to the radio and television networks for the opportunities they have given me over the years to bring reports and messages to our nation. My special thanks go to them for the opportunity of addressing you this evening. 3 days from now, after half a century in the service of our country, I shall lay down the responsibilities of office as, in traditional and solemn ceremony, the authority of the presidency is vested in my successor. This evening, I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. Like every other citizen, I wish the new president and all who will labor with him Godspeed. I pray that the coming years will be blessed with peace and prosperity for all. Our people expect their president and the Congress to find essential agreement on issues of great moment, the wise resolution of which will better shape the future of the nation. My own relations with the Congress, which began on a remote and tenuous basis when, long ago, a member of the Senate appointed me to West Point, have since ranged to the intimate during the war and immediate post-war period, and finally to the mutually interdependent during these past 8 years. In this final relationship, the Congress and the administration have, on most vital issues, cooperated well to serve the nation good rather than mere partisanship, and so have assured that the business of the nation should go forward. So my official relationship with the Congress ends in a feeling, on my part, of gratitude that we have been able to do so much together. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. 3 of these involved our own country. Despite these holocausts, America is today the strongest, the most influential, and most productive nation in the world. Understandably proud of this preeminence, we yet realize that America's leadership and prestige depend not merely upon our unmatched material progress, riches, and military strength, but on how we use our power in the interest of world peace and human betterment. Throughout America's adventure in free government, our basic purposes have been to keep the peace, to foster progress in human achievement, and to enhance liberty, dignity, and integrity among peoples and among nations. To strive for less would be unworthy of a free and religious people. Any failure traceable to arrogance or our lack of comprehension or readiness to sacrifice would inflict upon us grievous hurt, both at home and abroad. Progress toward these noble goals is persistently threatened by the conflict now engulfing the world. It commands our whole attention, absorbs our very beings. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. Unhappily, the danger it poses promises to be of indefinite duration. To meet it successfully, there is call for not so much the emotional and transitory sacrifices of crisis, but rather those which enable us to carry forward steadily, surely, and without complaint, the burdens of a prolonged and complex struggle with liberty, the stake. Only thus shall we remain, despite every provocation, on our charted course toward permanent peace and human betterment. Crises there will continue to be. In meeting them, whether foreign or domestic, great or small, there is a recurring temptation to feel that some spectacular and costly action could become the miraculous solution to all current difficulties. A huge increase in newer elements of our defenses, development of unrealistic programs to cure every ill in agriculture, a dramatic expansion in basic and applied research. These and many other possibilities, each possibly promising in itself, may be suggested as the only way to the road we wish to travel. But each proposal must be weighed in the light of a broader consideration, the need to maintain balance in and among national programs. Balance between the private and the public economy. Balance between the cost and hoped-for advantages. Balance between the clearly necessary and the comfortably desirable. Balance between our essential requirements as a nation and the duties imposed by the nation upon the individual. Balance between actions of the moment and the national welfare of the future. Good judgment seeks balance in progress. Lack of it eventually finds imbalance and frustration. The record of many decades stands as proof that our people and their government have, in the main, understood these truths and have responded to them well in the face of threat and stress. But threats, new in kind or degree, constantly arise. Of these I mention two only. A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society. Another factor in maintaining balance involves the element of time. As we peer into society's future, we, you and I, and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. During the long lane of the history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be instead a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect. Such a confederation must be one of equals. The weakest must come to the conference table with the same confidence as do we, protected as we are by our moral, economic, and military strength. That table, though scarred by many past frustrations, cannot be abandoned for the certainty agony of disarmament, of the battlefield. Disarmament with mutual honor and confidence is a continuing imperative. Together we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Because this need is so sharp and apparent, I confess that I lay down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who has witnessed the horror and the lingering sadness of war, as one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. Happily, I can say that war has been avoided. Steady progress toward our ultimate goal has been made, but so much remains to be done. As a private citizen, I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road. So in this, my last good night to you as your president, I thank you for the many opportunities you have given me for public service in war and in peace. I trust in that service, you find some things worthy. As for the rest of it, I know you will find ways to improve performance in the future. You and I, my fellow citizens, need to be strong in our faith that all nations under God will reach the goal of peace with justice. May we be ever unswerving in devotion to principle, confident but humble with power, diligent in pursuit of the nation's great goals. To all the peoples of the world, I once more give expression to America's prayerful and continuing aspiration. We pray that peoples of all faiths, all races, all nations may have their great human needs satisfied, that those now denied opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full, that all who yearn for freedom may experience its spiritual blessings. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility, that all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
We have presented the farewell address by the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who spoke this evening from his office in the White House.